All right, so welcome everyone to the newbie weekly coaching call with me, Amir Khan. Um, just to remind you, our format is this is a 40-minute call, so we have a hard deadline when we actually end in 40 minutes. And the format is every week, either I have a topic and a presentation that I do, or I have a guest. Today we have a guest. We have Kelley Bass. Is that correct way to pronounce your last name? All right, perfect. Kelley is a broker. She's going to give you more information about what areas she's licensed in. And the purpose for her to be on call today is to talk about how at least I have started buying. When I started buying SlowFlips, it was on the MLS. I did buy and I still buy from our wholesalers in our community. But being remote, I'm in Texas. I thought it was just an excellent opportunity for me to be able to buy using, great professionals who are there. However, prior to August this year, as you might know, rules have changed. And so I've used buyer's agent. It always has worked for me. They have always been very helpful for me. But since August, things have changed. And some people have asked me those questions on how we go about that now. And I had some idea, but I wasn't very sure. So I thought let's just get an expert who can give us their view on this. So, like I said, Kelley, welcome. You can unmute your mic. And I do have questions that I'm going to go through, which will give us some idea on the topic. But then what we'll do is you can elaborate on those questions as I go along. And after that, we'll take questions from the audience as well. All right. Having said that,
Alrighty.
Kelley, can you just
Yes.
share with us specifically where you're licensed, what states are you familiar with, and then we'll start the questions.
All right. Hello, everybody. Thanks, Amir, for having me on tonight. Nice to meet y'all. And welcome to Slow Flipping for all of y'all. I'm assuming everybody's kind of new here. I've been slow flipping for about a year, but I've been a real estate broker and in real estate for about 30 years. I'm in Virginia Beach, Virginia. I have a small firm here that I'm the principal broker of, and I'm familiar with filling also for several of our group members in Michigan and Illinois and Missouri and Ohio. So I've got, a lot of experience that is pretty far spread. The net is spread wide, but and I know y'all have a lot of questions. I'm guessing I know Amir does about how everything is going to be working now with the new regulations and laws provided by our wonderful DOJ in the lawsuit that was filed against the National Association of Realtors and settled. Um, I will preface anything that you have by first saying nobody needs to freak out because not that much has changed. But certainly ask me so all the questions you have, and if I don't know the answer, I'll find out. But I'm hoping that I do.
Okay, perfect. So, guys, like I said, I do have 7 questions. I will ask those questions, and if you have questions, please raise your hand. Do not type it in the chat. I just can't keep up with that. So if you don't mind, just raise your hand. And once I'm done with those 7 questions, we'll go through your questions. All right, so Kelley, you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, here's the first question. So prior to the changes, so this is before what happened in August. Uh, can you explain how somebody could work with a real estate agent, whether a listing agent or a buyer's agent, to buy a slow flip?
Sure.
Why the MLS? I'm sorry, I just want to make sure so everybody's on the same page. We are only talking about buying via the MLS.
Right. Okay. So we're talking about homes that are listed that either y'all are working and have a working brokerage relationship with your agent or agency who is appointed or has an agent representing you. Um, Even then, On the buyer side, you would need to have a buyer broker signed with that agent before you viewed the home. So that part is still the same, even though many agents were pretty lax about doing that. That's been in place for many, many years. A lot of people don't do it. So a lot of people think this is a new thing. And you would have had to set an arrangement of a fee with that agent when you signed that buyer broker form, agreeing to pay that agent to compensate that agent for their time, which is on a typical transaction about 100 hours to get from the beginning to the end. And that would normally be about 3%. That's always been negotiable, despite what a lot of people think. That agent would then take you to a home that was probably listed on an MLS. They would probably send you a bunch of homes and you'd say, oh yeah, I want to see that one. That sounds good. And then they would either do a video view with you or they would actually physically take you to that home. When that agency that had that home listed, when they signed a listing agreement with the seller, they signed a listing agreement that said, we are going to list this house for this fee. Typically, an industry standard would be 6%. And this is also where the lawsuit got sticky because they thought that this was a fixed fee. I can tell you that throughout my 30 years, I've done 4%, I've done 3% total, I've done 6%, I've done 7%, I've done 10% on vacant land commercials. So these have always been negotiated. But the seller would then agree on that same listing agreement that part of that fee, that 6%, was going to be paid out to a selling agent, and by selling agent, I mean the buyer broker representing you, if upon execution of that contract, right? And so it looks like, hey, the seller is paying the entire 6%. Now, essentially, on a line item on your closing statement, it is all coming from the seller at that point. That's a built-in price with the home. When appraisers call agents to say, hey, I'm looking at your sale that I want to use as a comp, they ask, were commissions paid? Were closing cost assistance paid? We tell them yes or no. And believe it or not, that factors in to an appraisal on a comp. They care about those seller concessions and commissions that were paid. So you as a buyer, didn't pay anything up front. You might have signed a buyer broker agreement saying, hey, I know you have to be compensated, and if they're not going to pay, then we'll make sure you get your 3%. And then you would just ask the seller to add it on top and you would finance it all in. One way or the other, it was getting paid, and it was getting paid not out of a buyer's pocket. So that was all that was important. There would be ads, and I'm sure you've all heard, that said, hey, make sure your representative won't cost you anything. And that was another part of that lawsuit, because it made it look like the seller paid all, the buyer paid nothing. And so there was just some stickiness. And by the way, it was illegal for us before September this year, to ever even negotiate any commissions in the purchase price of a home. I mean, it was literally illegal. So now we've gone from that's illegal to now you must negotiate commissions with the price of the home, if that makes any sense.
Right. Okay, so let me make sure that was a long and I appreciate it because it was very thorough. But for our purposes, so when we are talking about slow flip, one big issue is we are dealing with homes that are substantially low in price. And of course, that makes a lot of difference. When you're dealing with a $300,000, $200,000 home, that 6% is substantial or is enough, right? But when you're dealing with $30,000 house, we also have another issue. So my question is, now that has changed with the changes that effective August 17th. Tell us now how the commission is supposed to be structured.
It's the buyer is responsible for making sure that the agent on their side is paid to begin with. You won't have any idea. We're not allowed to put in a listing how much the seller is willing to compensate a buyer's agent. So you have to go in with your buyer broker agreement signed before you can view the home, and these will be audited now, so that's a must. And that you will have already determined with your buyer's agent what they expect. Now, a lot of people have a minimum of 1,200 or 1,500 or $1,000. So when we're dealing with these $30,000 and $40,000 homes, which would only provide a commission
Yeah.
of 3%, $600, $800, obviously agents can't work for that. They've got errors and omissions. They've got fees that have to come out of that. They'd be losing money. So I've seen a lot of them just say 1,500 minimum. So you just have to build that in. Now, there could be occasion where you write the offer and you tell your agent, look, I want you to go ahead and ask for that seller to pay your fee. Because even though you've agreed to pay it, doesn't mean you can't ask for it in your contract. So then your
Yeah.
agent would write that in as a request, as a kind of a seller concession, and they're either going to agree to it or not. Sometimes they'll just agree to it. You cannot ask for more. The agent can't ask for more than what you've agreed to in your buyer broker agreement.
Okay. So I understand this, right? So let's assume, because I've used buyer's agent several times, and of course before these changes. So now let's assume I am working with a buyer's agent, and the buyer's agent tells me that, we have to sign this agreement, and then you have to commit to this commission. Now, having said that, my experience after these changes that happened was that they did tell me, my buyer's agent did tell me that we can negotiate with the seller, and I didn't understand that at that point. So I'm glad that you're explaining this to me. But my question is the commission that we are now negotiating with the buyer's agent who's representing us, how is it negotiable? Is it negotiable to the level where whatever the buyer's agent finds out what the seller is willing to pay?
The buyer's agent, the only way the buyer's agent is going to find out what the seller is willing to pay is in a counteroffer after you've presented the written offer.
Sign with them.
There's an exception to that. There is a place on our contract here, and I believe on others, that provides a check mark for the agent to disclose to a buyer's agent upon request what the seller is willing to pay.
Wow. Okay.
They can choose to mark yes. What we're seeing is most of them are saying no, that
No.
we don't want that disclosed. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
And what we're also seeing is a lot of sellers going, okay, I'll pay. Because guess what? I mean,
Yeah. You
this
have an
is not
offer.
a seller's market. This
Yeah.
is not a buyer's market.
Yeah.
And you're not sitting there holding all the cards. And no buyer is going to be paying less because of this. And no seller is going to be getting any more. All we've done is move it to another line on the settlement statement. No one's saving any money. This is not causing the real estate. This is not shaking up the market. This isn't doing anything. And in the beginning, when sellers thought, oh, I can list it and I'm not going to offer anything, I promise you within 2 weeks of that house not being sold, they're changing their minds real
Yeah.
quick when they see those offers and realizing they're going to have to, it's same old, same old.
So let me understand this. Is the actual I'm talking about the whole commission, which was 6%. Is the commission still 6%, or that number has changed?
That number has not changed.
So if that
At
number
the
has
end
not,
of the day,
that's what I was thinking.
95% are closing at
I,
6%. I mean, we're giving them up, if we're having problems and there's some work that we didn't know needed to be done, and we're all chipped in just like we always did. Hey, I'll give up 0.5%, the other agent will give it up, and like, let's just get this thing. Let's all chip in here. Let's get it to closing. Let's make everybody happy. Same as we've always done. Everything is negotiable. Yeah.
Okay, so this is interesting. So let me ask you this question. This is going to be interesting. With the new changes, what does it mean for a slow flip buyer to work directly with the listing agent? Does the seller not pay the whole commission for the listing agent?
That's a great question. Okay, so there's also a place on the listing agreement that draws out, hey, if in the event this is not a co-broke situation and we're already willing to pay 6%, 3% to you and 3% to the co-broke, then if you bring us the buyer, I'm willing to pay X amount of dollars. That's something that's worked out between the listing agent and the seller. and then whatever they're willing to pay them, and or they can mark. We do not want you to provide any dual representation. You must designate another agent. It's not going to really save the slow flipper buyer any money. It's all still going to get paid, and it's kind of on the back end, and it's something you probably wouldn't even know about. But remember, when you do that, if they don't want a dual agency, which is impossible, first of all, there's no way that I can represent you and the
Mm-hmm.
seller at the same time and have anybody's real best interest. I can treat you as a customer, and I can do fiduciary duties, and I can handle the contract and do the steps to get it to closing. But I'm not going to advise you.
Yeah.
You're on your own at that point. So if you're just savvy at real estate and you know what you're doing, you don't need
Yeah.
representation,
That's
right?
that's what I realized. You're right.
Yeah, you don't need it. If you're kind of out of your realm, and remember, you're going into their market now. Even I want to be represented if I'm going to Flint, Michigan, St. Louis,
Mhm.
Saginaw, Toledo, Ohio, Granite City, whatever. I'm going to want my representation because I don't know their contracts, I don't know their market, and I do not know all of the necessary forms to keep me out of trouble, to make sure that if something happens later, I'm not sitting over here holding the bag with occupancy inspections and residential property disclosures. We've already got somebody that's being sued in our
Yeah.
group for not having the proper disclosures, and it negates all those payments. And by law, we can get ourselves in trouble by trying to save a few $100 or
Mm.
$1,000 in the beginning, and we don't have any business in business conducting business that way. That's just setting everybody up for failure.
All right. So then, do you have specific suggestions and recommendations or best practices when working with a buyer's agent?
I mean, just make sure that the buyer's agent is working for you. Make sure that they understand that even though you are looking for, um, how should I put this? The type of slow flip that we're looking for. Okay, we're looking for habitable homes. Um, you got to make sure you've got a buyer's agent that knows real estate and knows investors. Not all agents are created equally, and they may want to do a good job for you, but it doesn't mean they're going to.
Mm.
You can get yourself in a lot of trouble there too.
Okay. And then finally, last question. What are your suggestions and recommendations and best practices when working directly with the listing agent, if there's somebody wants to do that?
If you're not savvy in real estate, then my advice is don't. My
Perfect.
advice is, you better know what you're doing, and don't think you do just because you did one deal, because they're all different.
Absolutely. Well, that's all the questions I had. So if you have questions, please raise your hand in the system and I'll call on you. And I wanted to share with you, Kelly, some recent experiences that I had. It was very interesting. So number one, I had worked with some buyers agents before, and they wanted to work with me again. And they sent me this contract, which, had the same verbiage that you're talking about, but she wasn't able to explain it to me well. When I asked her questions, she wasn't, and I was not very happy because she didn't explain who is paying the commission, and I obviously needed to know. So that was my one experience with the buyer's agent side. With the listing agent, it was even more interesting because when I approached, and I've bought with listing agents, and you're right, I have a lot of experience, so I take calculated risks in that sense. But this listing agent had a special term in there that she wanted me to pay additional commission on top of what she was getting. And so when I told her, look, I have private lenders and my private lenders will not pay additional commission. So she simply took it out. So I thought I
Good for
didn't know what,
you.
yeah, but I didn't know. That's why I always ask, there's no harm in asking. So those were my two experiences. Okay, so we have one question. Bob, go ahead, unmute yourself and go ahead, please.
Kelly, thank you very much for being on the show and sharing.
Sure,
If
Bob.
I understood correctly, I think you said that as a buyer, we're now being required to sign a buyer's agent agreement. Are we then locked into that buyer's agent? And I ask that because we had a not good experience in the past when we did that.
I'm so glad you asked that. Thank you, because I should have clarified and I should have expanded on that. So in that buyer broker agreement, there are a couple of different lines there. There is a space to provide one address to one house and have a start date and an end date of the relationship, the buyer broker relationship as it pertains to that specific address. And then it will have a clause that says if you wind up buying that house within, what's that, we'll call it 180 days, because that's typical. And that agent was the procuring cause of you going to look at that house, and you would still owe that agent a commission. Any other houses exclusive outside of that buyer broker agreement for that specific house, you're not bound to him for anything. So you make sure you sign specific agreements for each specific address that you're going to, unless you just feel so comfortable and develop a relationship that you're okay with having some exclusivity with that one agent or brokerage firm. Because remember, if that agent leaves the brokerage firm, y'all, you really are signing an agreement with the brokerage firm, right? So every agent hangs a license with the firm, and you're working with that agent. But if that agent messes up and, all of a sudden, they get their license sent back to the state DPOR office or whatever they call it in each state, then you now have a relationship with the firm that you have to continue. So, don't marry yourself, forever to an agent if you can help it.
Yes, yes. We wish we had known that before.
I'm sorry you didn't. Yeah. I'm sorry that you
Yes,
had a
but
bad experience. Yeah. No,
yeah.
but don't take that one and say, oh my gosh, I'm so frustrated, because, it does happen. But hey, you know what? You've learned something, and now you can move forward with that knowledge that it was going to happen eventually. So you got it early, hopefully. Got it out of the way.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Bob. Is that it? Everybody, no one has any questions? I can't believe it.
Major, did you have a question? There was something in the chat that you
Yeah, I was just I didn't hear if you mentioned it. What market you're working as a real estate agent, and then what SlowFlip markets are you in?
Okay, so I am I'm a broker in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and I work around Virginia Beach, Virginia, all of Virginia, and some in North Carolina. And of course then I'm a reciprocity down in Arkansas and Florida, but I don't do too much down there. My markets, I'm kind of all over the place. So I've got Arkansas, Mississippi, Michigan, Ohio, Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana.
What does that mean? Explain that. Which means if somebody has a property in those states, you can have somebody in your network show you the property and help you.
I have boots on the ground in 3 or 4 of those areas now, because I own houses in some of those
Right.
areas, but I'm confined now to just a couple of different places that I like, because I decided that I don't want to be all over the place, but I still work in some of the other markets helping other people to fill their houses. So I'm kind of still involved in those, and I don't represent them in any type of brokerage capacity.
Got it.
Or, I take them from start to finish and fill them, but it's just more of I call it a facilitator, because I'm not representing the seller or the buyer. I'm
I
just
got it.
facilitating the filling, pretty much.
Got it. So some of you might not know this, that real estate agents are required, and brokers are members of a certain association, and they have access to MLS, which is also limited, which means somebody who is licensed in, I don't know where you are in Virginia, if she's not licensed in Texas, which I'm sure she's not, she does not have access to the MLS system and listings in Texas. So if
Correct.
there is a Texas listing, she would not be able to look it up, She will not be able to do anything in terms of that capacity, right? So in other words, you have to be licensed in those areas. In fact, I know agents in Texas, which, there are some areas that are so large that even if you're in the state of Texas, you may not have all states because, as you know, there are, counties and cities. And so, it's even limited to that. So the question now is if, I bought properties off of the MLS successfully in past. It has worked. I've used both buyer's agent. I've used listing agents. But what do you think are a couple of things that somebody who's relatively new, but there's so much opportunity on the MLS to find properties, right? I mean, think about it. It's such a great way to find properties on, Zillow and all that, and do your analysis. And so it's really easy if we can find an easy way to work with buyer's agents. So let's say somebody goes on Zillow and they find the listing. I also have done sessions where I teach them how to approach these listing agents. And I've used both. I would first try to work directly with the listing agent, and I try to let them know because I have experience. I let them know, look, I'm not using a buyer's agent, and I will work directly with you. In my opinion, and you could correct me, Kelly, is since I tell them that I'm not using a buyer's agent, they know that there's no other agent involved. So they're talking about whatever commission. Again, remember, we're talking about a $30,000 home. So
Right.
otherwise, they're already thinking, oh my God, now I have to deal with somebody about this. A lot of these agents have listings in $100,000, $200,000 homes, right? And this maybe they're one of those listing that is a $30,000 home, right, Kelly? So which means it's not really very high on their priority anyway, right? So
Or
you
they
have
want
to
it gone.
understand. Yeah, and so I hear a lot of newbies get so frustrated. Hey, nobody responds to me. Why can't they just call me back? Or it's some of the reason. I'm not saying that's the only reason, but I've found some are just unprofessional, like you said before. Not all agents and brokers are the same. But so you have to kind of understand that. So that's when I've used buyer's agent, which means whoever was the agent that I was working in that area, and I would reach out to them and say, hey, look, there's this new property that came on the market. I'm interested. Can you help me with this? So in past, they've helped me till the point they were actually going to the showing. That's when they had me sign anything. But now they want me to sign right up front before they do anything else, which I understand now. So can you give us some ideas? So walk us through for somebody who is relatively new, not me, that I will work with a listing agent, and they found a property and they're trying to approach the agent, whether they hear back from the agent or not. Just walk us through what are the things they should do.
So when you contact an agent first, um, try to let them know that you're serious because when you have a $30,000 house, they're just getting pounded with texting calls from people about that property, right? Hopefully they've represented the property well, and so you have an idea that it's in pretty bad condition or habitable or not habitable or just condemnable. And if you don't, then make sure you get yourself a list of questions to ask them that are important to you. Don't remember they're representing the seller. So there's some things that they can disclose to you, and there are some things that you're going to be expected to learn on your own. But you certainly can ask really good, purposeful questions that aren't taking up a ton of their time, but are just meaningful with quality, not quantity. And then let them know that you are a serious buyer, that you have funds already lined up to purchase this home if it works for you. You are not kicking tires. You want to try to do a little bit of work on your own because remember, this is a very low end property, and that agent also is trying to make a living. So we're all trying to eat. Try to look around a little bit on a Google map, and I know some of them are outdated, but you can get an idea when you're on Street View. Go down the street, for yourself. See what these neighbors' houses look like. You know, if this is boarded up, that's fine as long as the rest of them aren't boarded up. But you know, if your house is not and every house on the street's boarded up, I mean, you really even want that house? Are you wasting your time just because the price is right? Because you don't really have anything. You got a house that you know you're going to be unsellable, unfillable. It's probably not worth the 30,000. Be like might be worth 5,000 if you're lucky, and some of them, if someone handed you the deed, you don't even want it, right? So just be mindful of their time and your time. Do a little street view. Make sure it's something that you're interested in, and you're not just calling because you know, hey, this fits our slow flip model.
You're right. So in other words, about coming across as being serious, what I do is, like you said, you ask questions that are very direct. So in my case, the first thing is, if the listing doesn't have enough pictures, you can't even do anything. So the first thing you want to do is, if there are few pictures, maybe one or two pictures from outside, my first question is, because I'm not going to buy anything if I don't see the condition. If the condition is so bad, because I already know what my buy box is, so I ask for pictures. But I asked in a way that they understand that I'm really serious. And so I always ask for pictures. And I've had most of the time, this is another thing a lot of people don't know, um, because these are so low price properties, some of these brokers they have pictures. They just don't upload them. And so many times I've asked them and they said, oh yeah, here they are. And then there are a whole bunch of pictures and the house is perfectly fine. And maybe not a lot of people are approaching them because there are just not enough pictures and they're just saying, oh, you know what, I just give up. All right, so we have another question. Shannon, go ahead, please.
So now we have to sign up front before anything happens. So let's say after all the negotiations and checking the house out, the deal does not go through. So no one would get paid. You wouldn't pay a realtor then that was helping you if the deal didn't go through, correct?
Not at all.
Okay.
You don't pay a dime.
So you wouldn't, even though you signed something, you're not obligated. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the only time a brokerage firm gets paid on either side is going to be upon execution, and that's closing. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Unless y'all had worked out something, you know, in the beginning, and there are some people who do work out upfront fees to show, but you would have to agree to that. And good question, Shan. Amir, back to what you were saying when you were talking about maybe no one called because there weren't any pictures. Look, there are also listing agents who make huge mistakes. And just because they think it's a dump and it's not worth anything at all, they could have that thing woefully underpriced because they're so used to dealing with stuff and they're going, oh my gosh, this is, you know, this is horrible. But you may go, oh my gosh, this is like this is perfect, you know, so everything is in the eye of the beholder, and not all agents. So I bought some like that where I'm like, oh my gosh, boy, they had no idea what this was. So
Okay. Kari, go ahead, please.
Good evening. This is Kari's wife, Carlita. Thank you for having this tonight. My question is, I hear you saying ask good questions. Is it possible to get a list of the good questions to ask?
sure. I'll give you an example. So you've already done your street view, okay, by the time you call and talk to this agent, and you've already seen kind of what the street's about. As Amir said, if they don't have pictures, you're certainly want to ask for interior photos. They're either going to have them or they won't. If they do have them, I'm sure they'll be happy to send them over in a Google file or however they've got them. And if they don't, then you certainly ask them if they're going to be having any done soon, you know, because sometimes they just stick it up there because they can sell it without taking any, and sometimes that, you know, they'll go out and take them if they can. If you have boots on the ground there, or if you are comfortable with having that list agent either show you the house, do a video showing, ask her. But let me go back for a minute. Ask the last time it was habitated. Ask if it had an owner in there very previously. Ask if the meter is set on the side of the house or if it's been removed. Ask if the water meter has been removed. Ask if there is any placard. And by placard, I mean, is there any condemnation? Have there been any notices of condemnation on the house? Has this home been in a land bank? And that doesn't apply to every area, but it does apply to some. Ask if they know how long the owner has owned the house. Because if they just bought it, then you probably don't want it. Ask if it's been previously listed before. Because they could have just listed the house yesterday, but it may have been listed for a year prior. You know? Ask if they're aware of any fires in the house. That's a big deal. They can cover up some stuff and slap some drywall and you don't see it, but all of a sudden, you know, there's no wiring, there's nothing. You know, you want to make sure there's a panel box inside the house. A lot of times, especially when we get into the winter months, you know, pipes burst or people steal the copper out of them. Typically in our group, we don't go with, does it have plumbing pipes that much, because really a lot of them don't. And we want them to, but if it's a really good house otherwise, then certainly doesn't matter. Ask if she's aware of any roof leaks. An agent broker is required to tell you anything that you can see. They're not required to tell you latent defects, and those are the things that you cannot see. But if they know it, they have to disclose it. If it's an area with a basement, ask them if there's any standing water in the basement. Ask them if the powers are on, if the utilities are on currently. These are things right off the bat that are going to let you know, and you'll get used to it. It's a heck no, or it's a hey, this might work. So
Okay, great. Thank you. That was excellent. We just have about a minute left. So Bob, if you have a short question, go ahead, please.
If the answer's too long, just say it's too long. I've always heard if somebody's selling a house, they say, oh, make sure that you get an agent. You'll get a much higher price if you get a really good agent. And so it always bears the question, then they're working on commission. They want to get it sold the highest. What's the benefit of working with a buyer's agent who's also working on commission, for me for being frank here, who's also working on commission and gets a bigger commission if the price is higher? What's the benefit of working with a buyer's agent?
well, first of all, just do the math on, you know, I mean, so their commission, if the price was higher, would be what? I mean, you would have to give a significant, so 3%. So on $100,000 house, it's $3,000. On $110,000 house, it's $3,300. There's not really much benefit to the agent for jacking up the price. And by the way, house is just worth what a buyer's willing to pay for it. It's only worth what the market will bear. So I have never seen anybody, we don't jack up prices to try to get more commission.